I want to do, there's a front wheel and the rear wheel. Everyone's always intimidated by the rear wheel because of the drivetrain. It's so much harder to get out, right? Not at all. So the first thing you guys have to do is open up your brakes. If you look, the tire is actually wider than the brake pads. Now this happens differently on different types of bikes. On road bikes it's real simple. This lever right here opens up your brakes. We've got a mountain bike over there. I'll show you how to do that one next. So the first thing you've got to do is open up the brakes.
That's awesome.
Go behind me, Kate.
Alright, now the next thing we want to do, guys, is get the chain down in this gear and this gear. You want as minimal chain tension as possible, so put the chain in the two smallest gears. The best way to do that is you can just lift it up and hit your shifters.
Thanks, Laura.
Pedal the bike, and there you go. Now when the chain's in the small gear here and the small gear here, you have as minimal chain tension as possible. This will make it a lot easier to get the wheel out. Now getting the wheel out is very simple. On a quick release, all you have to do is open your quick release, and to get it past the derailleur, you have to move the derailleur back and out of the way. Now over the years I've become a master of doing this on the trail and not getting dirty. The trick is you want to touch it right here, and when you move it like that, it comes right out of there.
That was fast.
Okay, so you need to do that again.
Well, I'll do it several times, and then each of you guys are going to have to do it several
Oh
times.
yeah, no,
Because the here and here I missed. The here and here I liked, though. That was nice.
Now to put the chain back on, it's really easy. This gear cluster just has to go in between the upper and lower part of the chain. Very simple. You can just move your derailleur out of the way. See how I'm setting that on the gear right there? And then just maneuver the guy back in place. Of course, now that it's on camera, it'll fight me. So now the wheel is reinstalled. So again, to get it out, you open your brakes, open your quick release, and again, right here on the back of this derailleur, this little metal tab typically stays pretty clean, and the front of the derailleur typically stays pretty clean. So if you grab it there and there, I can maneuver that derailleur out of my way. So that's the rear wheel. Rear wheel's by far the hardest part. The front wheel comes out a lot the same, but there's just a little bit of a difference. They have safety tabs on the fork to make sure that your wheel doesn't
They're called lawyer
fall out.
tabs. I'm just saying.
They are called lawyer tabs because somewhere there was probably a lawsuit
Yes,
as a
there
result
was.
of one coming out. So the way that this works, you open your quick release, open your brakes, but now that wheel won't come out of there. What you have to do is just hold this and unscrew it. Now the wheel comes out. Now if you look closely, these right here are the lawyer tabs. They're little tabs that stick out just enough that the quick release won't clear them unless you unscrew it. So if your quick release is open while you're riding, your steering's going to get a little funky, but the wheel should not fall out. At least that's the design behind it. Now sometimes the pro racers will file those off, so you have faster wheel changes. I don't recommend that, because your wheel's not being held in there very securely, and when you put your bike on a roof rack, same thing.
roof
Your
rack
entire
for
bike is now
sure.
vulnerable falling off of the rack.
I've done it. 75 miles an hour on I-25, no lawyer tabs, and the bike flips up and over the back of the bike.
Not good for the bike.
Or the car behind you.
It stayed on because it still had the thing through the rear tire. It's just that now it's bouncing around on top of my trunk. Awesome. Yes, I've done it all.
When you look at the way a quick release lever works, if I close this, you can see it basically pinches it. So opening and closing this is what's compressing things. This end is threaded, so it's just like a bolt. You can actually take the quick release off of the bike if you want to. There are two springs on this thing, and the springs are designed just to center the wheel up. Now you notice the spring has a wide end and a pointy end.
Help us figure out a way to remember, Brandon. Give us a clue.
Well, the easy trick here is the pointy ends point towards the center, so the arrows are pointing together.
Aha.
Okay? And what that does is, if you look at your dropouts on your bike, this end here will fit through the dropout, this end won't. Great prank to play on your friends. If you open the quick release and flip their springs around and close it, it's a little time bomb that stays hidden until the next time they take their wheel out. And then what happens is this wide end goes over the axle, and you will never get that wheel in the frame. It'll fight and fight and fight and fight you.
And it'll jack up your shifting in the rear.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Is there an ideal spot to close the tab when you're putting your
Yes.
wheel on and off?
there sure is. Okay. All right, so now the two springs point towards each other, and this is what the springs do. They just center it. Makes it easy to get in there. I've even heard of the pro riders taking the springs out. They're not necessary, and they weigh probably a gram apiece.
Perhaps go on a diet first before we get to that point.
Better climbing.
So what I've done is now I put this in here, but now if I close the quick release, it's not going to to do anything. You have to have the right tension. What I usually do is a trick. You see, I'll hold the lever so it's straight out like this, and I'll just tighten this guy up till it just gets snug. It's kind of a feel thing. You're going to have to get some practice at it. When you close your quick release lever, you should have enough force that you can see the outline of it on your hand for just a couple of seconds. You don't want so much force that you can't get it back open, but keep in mind this holds your wheel in. If you lose your wheel, you lose control. So it does have to be reasonably tight. Now, asking which direction to point them is a good point. A bad idea is to do that. Because then if you're riding along, especially mountain biking, you snag something that opens it up, your steering gets all kinds of funny. So you want them pointing someplace where they can't get opened if they hit something. Straight up or straight back. On mountain bikes, I always point them straight back because your rotor costs $40, quick release costs $15. If you have a severe enough impact, it can save you money. So, what you do, find a spoke that comes along, you get underneath your tire and hook it, and the point of that little hook is you can now hook it to your spoke so it holds it in place.
I didn't know that.
Now, sometimes you get lucky and a tire fits so loosely, you can just go like that to take it off. Sometimes you're not lucky, and you have to have this guy here, and you take your second one, and you're working it off until it gets loose. But basically, once you're at this point, if you slide your tire lever, you've effectively taken 1/2 of the tire off of it.
And you took the lower cost tire, right?
Huh?
The less expensive tire?
Is looser.
Or looser?
I just grabbed a wheel off a bike out on the
Not always true. Not always true.
Really?
No.
Because there's some that are, the metal is so
tight.
that it's so hard, especially to get back in.
But not price related.
Oh, really?
Brand related.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought
And it's good.
I thought that was a tire thing, not a wheel thing. A tire thing.
Some wheels are bigger than others, slightly larger, like millimeters, so where it'll make a tire fit tighter or looser.
Like millimeters.
And the more times you've changed your tire, the more you're going to stretch it out.
Okay, so now if you're using the 2-lever method, you just have to go a little ways.
That's all right. I missed that part, but that's okay.
What part?
When you pull the tube out, that's okay.
And then I usually just move the tire back aside and get your tube out.
So, I have this little screwy thing. Do you have that on there?
I already took it off.
Okay, so on that note, how important is it to put that on?
I never put them on mine. It's just one thing you have to fuss with. If you have proper tire pressure, it's not necessary.
Great.
It's an extra gram you don't need.
It just keeps your stem in place from rattling sometimes.
Oh, maybe, yeah. That might help.
I just thought about that.
Okay.
It's mine. I was going to try to, I've never known.
Okay.
Oh, crap.
What you want to do is make sure that the thorn that gave you a flat's not still in your tire.
Like my piece of glass last week.
So what you want to do is feel the inside of the tire, but you don't want to use your bare hands. A rag's handy. If you don't have a rag, use your glove or something like that. I knew a guy once, I was talking to him, and he's sitting there feeling for something, and you see blood running down his wrist. He looked, and there was a piece of a razor blade in the tire. Oh my God.
That's why we always ride with full finger gloves.
Except for those of us with carpal tunnel.
Oh, always full finger.
Numb hands all the time.
Is that in Coleman for the USA Pro Cycling Challenge?
What, we found the razor blade?
Yeah,
No, it was years
and then they were
ago.
at razor blades all over the world.
They did? What?
Someone was like trying to...
Okay, so what do you recommend on the ride? Gloves?
I use my glove. Actually, I always carry a rag with me when I ride. So, okay, guys? So you take a rag, a glove, whatever you have that's handy, your hands if you're desperate and you have no choice, and you feel the inside of this tire. If you feel it snag on something, go back and look. You'll have a thorn still stuck in there. If you put a new tube in there and inflate it, it'll give you a second flat, and that's just insult to injury. You don't want that. So what we're going to do is go ahead, make sure there's nothing still in there. The next thing you want to inspect is your rim strip. Now you rarely have any problems, but see this blue piece right here? If I take my tire off, this protects your tube from the end of the spokes. If that rim strip's not present, you can get a flat tire. So if you look at this wheel here, there's no rim strip right there. Under high pressure, the tube will actually blow out at those spoke holes. So once you have it off of there, just glance at it. That's rarely, if ever, your problem. So you don't have to take the tire off completely. You can if you want. Now,
Those are called nipples, by the way.
Yes. So I'm just going to put this back on here, so we're all on the same page.
Beer and nipples.
Naughty.
Yep.
And one thing we do here at Treads, we always put the logo next to the valve for style points. Makes you go twice as fast. And what it actually does is when you're inflating your tire, you don't have to look for the valve. Just look for your logo. Your valve will be right next to it. So that doesn't actually affect anything, it's just something we do here to make things easier.
Where's my logo?
Right there.
Alright,
The big
it's at this point now.
Oh! Heads up.
You mean that? Yeah, the big gators.
Alright guys, it's at this point now that we have the decision, do we replace the tube or do we patch it? So what we're going to do is we're going to show you guys how to patch it. First thing you got to do is you find your hole in the tube. If you're out on a ride, I generally use my spare tube, but you never know. You might have your second flat of the day and you've already used your spare. You have no choice but to repair it.
Brandon, what are the limitations on a hole that you can or cannot patch? Like, how do you know if you have a choice or don't have a choice?
Well, holes along the outer edge, along your tire, can be patched because there's a nice gentle round profile that that patch sits up against. If the hole's up against the rim, that's a square edge, and that can't be patched because you'll put the patch on it, when you inflate it, it forms such a sharp edge that it'll cause the patch to disbond. So the only things that really can be patched are holes along the outer edge of your tube. If it's too far into the side or on the bottom of the tube's unfortunately done for. That's what took down my lucky 14 patch tube. It was one along the rim. It was pretty sad.
And was that basically a pinch flat? Why would you get a...
My rim strip shifted on me. It was a cheap bike at the time.
Do you still have the tube?
No, I should have, though. That would have been awesome. I'd have it hanging up in a frame. So if you're finding your hole on the side of the trail, you can inflate the tube with your pump a little bit to do that. I know this tube's okay, but I have one tube that's rolled up with a rubber band back there, right behind that Newcastle bottle. Someone just airmail that to me? Nope, nope. The one that's all rolled up there?
Oh, my bad.
All right, just go ahead and airmail it to me. There we go. So what I'm going to do, I'll be right back here. I'm going to use compressed air just because I can. Normally on the side of the trail you would be doing this with your pump.
Go, go.
What if you don't have your pump and you just have your CO2 cartridge?
Blow it in
You
by
have a lot of
mouth.
options to find the
Blow
hole.
it in by mouth.
Yeah.
Oh,
I could use a little of your CO2.
But see, I have a...
Probably.
It's pretty
You're
obvious
really good.
where the hole is in this guy. It's deflating almost instantly. So you just go around and find it. A lot of times the holes aren't this big. If you inflate your tube, what you can do is sit there and listen for it. And what I like to do is run it next to my face like this, because I can feel it just blow up against me and you can find that hole. So this tube here has a demo of various different stages of a patch. This is the hole right here. And you can see what I've done is I've taken a marker, just made little crosshairs around that hole. This helps me to find it. Also, I purposely put this hole in a really bad spot. It's right next to a seam. These suck to patch. That's why I did it, to show you guys how to do that. Okay? We can pass this around. Various different stages of a patch right here. We'll get to the rest of those here in a moment. Absolutely. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to patch this tube here. I'm just going to pretend my hole is right here. Okay, so once you've found your hole, the next step you have to do is patch it. Inside of the patch kit, you'll find various different patches.
This is for all the ladies at home. Thank you.
You have patches, tubes of glue, and a little piece of sandpaper.
Do you have extra patch kits?
Here you go.
this is more than enough too.
I got another one. I can replace like
You've never used a patch?
Got one here that's already open.
Little glue.
Is that your husband's part? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he doesn't got these like stros.
First is sand the tube. Now I'll give you guys a choice. You can watch me patch a tube, or if you guys want to, you can just put a patch on a tube to get the practice for it. This is something, though, that you'll end up having to learn at some point. So,
We'll watch you.
okay. So the first thing you have to do is sand the tube. What I generally do is just step on the tube and stretch it out. And so I find my hole. And do this, when you're doing this, make sure you're not punching a hole in this with your cleat or stepping on something on the ground. But you can see what I do is just kind of stand on it, stretch it, and sand this guy. And this is the least fun part of the, oh wow, totally ripped my sandpaper. Least fun part of the whole equation was you have to sand it quite a bit. If you don't rough up the surface, the glue will not stick. And if your patch fails, to patch it again is quite a bit difficult.
And how do you know when you're done?
I'll show you what it looks like. It should be pretty darn rough.
She just color. Is it really?
Yeah.
Pink?
That'd be awesome. You should design that.
Right?
When it's fully sanded.
You know what I've done at home? I'm with Megan. When I get a flat out on the road, I put in my backup tube, but I always patch my old ones. and I've sat down with a Dremel and done all the sanding with a power tool. Sit there and watch TV and patch like 30 tubes in one night.
You're like a cat. I have like 25.
So here's what we always do. We tie.
I'm serious.
Actually, I haven't had to buy a tube in a number of years because usually I just take old ones that customers don't want and take them home and patch them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We always tie a knot in our tubes with holes
I
because
do
they
that
always
too.
get mixed up with the good tubes.
Yeah.
And we put them
When you
all
have
in
a
the same
flat, just-
Ziploc bag, and then when we have time, we sit down in front
And
of the
now when I
PS.
see this, I know this has a hole in it someplace. So I do that exact same thing at home.
Michelle, you
Okay.
like that, don't you?
So now you can see where I've sanded it.
Yes, I do.
As long as the knot's tied well.
I was really proud of
Important
him
thing
for
to note
getting
here,
rid
guys.
of his tube.
May I see? Thank you.
The important thing to note here is that I've sanded it to where that seam is flat. See the seam here where the tube's manufactured? If you're near a seam, you have no choice but to sand that seam down. And you see, it didn't take me too terribly long to do. It's something that can easily be done out on the side of the
You're a
trail.
skilled practitioner.
I have patched thousands of holes probably over the years. Okay?
Brandon, is that why this one's so hard to fix? Is because the patch will lift up right there at the seam?
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to get the seam completely down.
Yeah, you do. And if you look at that, you can see that one's sanded too. So I purposely picked it right next to the seam. If you're lucky, it's not next to the seam, but how often does that really happen?
Because it's right on
So-
the...
Yeah. Well, the seam is a little ridge, and if you don't sand that flat, the air goes, it just flows up next to the seam and along out up from underneath of the patch. So that we're at that point next. Next, you apply your glue. There's two different types of patch kits out there. At this point, no matter how you patch a tube, you have no choice but to sand it to this point. They have what they call the glued type of a patch kit and a glueless patch kit. Now, glueless patch kits are like a decal. There's an adhesive on that already. You just peel it off. You've got one right here. The nice thing about this, it's tiny and lightweight and it's faster, but it's not as permanent. So they consider this an emergency repair. This will get you home. But if you want to get that tube to the point of having numerous patches on it and have it survive, you have to use the glued patches. What happens is this glue is a special type of a compound that actually melts the rubber and melts the patch, and they bond together and become one. And if it's properly installed, it actually makes your tube stronger because now it's harder to puncture if you were lucky enough to hit it in that same spot. So the next thing I'm going to do...
Is lucky enough to be struck by lightning.
Okay, so at this point you've got your patch. The part you sand obviously has to be bigger than your patch. Not a lot, but it does have to be bigger. So if you hold your patch up and it's not bigger, sand it some more. That part's pretty explanatory. On the glue, when you have a new tube of glue, when you open it up, there will be a little silver cover over it. They've thought of this. If you flip the cap over, there's a little point on the cap. Press it down, it punctures that top. Once you puncture this tube of glue, it's now got a 4-month lifespan at best. So, fortunately, glue is inexpensive.
You're done.
So what I do now at this point is I'm putting a little bit of glue.
So hard. Look, it's fossilized.
Yeah,
Is it coming
this
out?
one's fossilized. I'll grab another one.
Oh, is it? It's all old.
This one. Okay, so here's your foil and the puncturing cap.
Whoop, I heard it.
Okay. Oh, I meant to do that. Okay. So now I'm putting on a thin amount of glue. And the trick here is I like to have it be an equal thickness all the way across, only because it dries consistently. You're applying the glue first. Okay? Then the glue has to dry. Basically, you want this glue dry when you apply the patch. If it's wet, it won't stay put. This takes a little bit of time. This is probably the most time-consuming part of it. You can blow on the tube, you can sit there and listen to the birds, whatever you need to do to kill the time. We're going to give it here a few minutes. If you have the glueless type patches, at this point you don't have to let the glue dry. You just peel it off and stick it on there. And the trick to applying a patch is you want to, you know where your hole is, apply pressure right at the hole and smooth in outward directions to try and force as much air out as you can. Because the fewer voids you have between the patch and the tube, the better it's going to seal. If you have a lot of voids in there, then you run the risk of the patch failing on you. And usually when it comes to patches, I stick with name brand stuff. Spend the extra $1, get the Park Tool stuff. It usually works better.
Or the Treads Bicycle Outfitters.
I think ours were made by the same company. So.
Stocking stuffers.
Okay, so now you can see that the glue is dry. You don't want to touch it at this point. The oils in your skin will contaminate it and affect its ability to stick. Now on the patch is sandwiched between aluminum foil and a little plastic piece. The plastic piece sticks to the patch, so you peel it off. Again, don't touch the surface. You don't want the oils of your skin to interfere. And then I push the patch on there, and I start in center and I'm working my way out. Just trying to get as much.
Dry?
The glue's already dried. Yeah, it takes 2 or 3 minutes at most.
So the glue is actually sealing it,
Yeah.
and then you're just sticking on the patch that's got some kind of adhesive on it.
The patch doesn't have any sort of an adhesive on it. The glue's the only adhesive involved. The patch is made out of a similar material to the tube, and the glue actually melts the material and then rebonds it back together. So now you just peel this little plastic piece off, and this is where you want to be careful, because sometimes, and you may want to get a close-up on this, see how it wants to peel the patch off of there? You got to find a spot where it's not peeling your patch off of there. Okay? So now that the patch is all the way mashed on there, one
Maybe the
last
most
step
exciting
that I
video
like
of all
to
time.
do is I take the glue and I just make one little ring of glue around the outer edge of the patch. This is just adding that extra layer of sealant right there. And then I let this dry before installing it into the tire. You don't want it to go in there wet, because then it will glue to the inside of your tire. And when you peel the tube out, the patch usually sticks to one surface or the other. You never can tell which one it'll stick to. There are a number of things you can do to neutralize the glue. When I'm at my house, I just take a little bit of baby powder, just a pinch, throw it on there, mash it into the glue, and it neutralizes it so it won't stick to your tire. On the side of the trail, I use finely ground dirt. Just, not rocks or anything sharp, but a little bit of dirt on the side of the trail. If you throw it on the glue, it'll pretty much neutralize that glue so it no longer works.
And how do you know if it actually works successfully?
Well, if your tire holds air, it'll work.
You make
Um,
it home.
Yeah. And this is something, again, I recommend you guys practice this at your house. Take your old tubes when you get a flat, patch them, and then carry them around as spares. You can let it sit overnight and then inflate it, put it underneath the water, and see if it holds. Initially, so I find my valve hole, which is next to the logo if you're doing it with style points. If you just grab your tire and move it to the side, you can insert the valve into there and lift the tire up over it. And at this point, I just go through and just kind of loosely install the tube inside of the tire right here. Okay. Now what I'm doing next is grabbing this whole thing and moving the tube so it goes over the wheel. Because if it gets pinched, if I force the issue, see the tube can get pinched between the tire and the rim right here? You can't actually damage your tube doing that. So the next step is you just go through and make sure that the tube's inside the tire, but also over and inside of the rim, if that makes any sense. If it's fighting you, let just a little bit of air out. Generally, that's all there is to that. Next is the hard part. Now we've got to get this other side of the tire on there. And I've done this a lot. I can usually do it with my bare hands. But you see how I start at one side? Okay, we're going to grab the tire lever. I'll show you guys that.
You started at the stem side?
I always
That was
do.
my question.
It doesn't matter where you start it, but out of habit, I do always start at my valve
But
stem.
isn't it easier
doesn't
to
matter,
start
does it?
at the stem or to finish at the stem?
Looser on the other side?
It's usually easier to start.
Start at the stem and work away from it.
So right now we're totally loose. If you guys see how I'm doing this, I'm just
Wiggle, wiggle.
going around and moving it over.
And then it gets hard.
And now this is the part where it gets real hard.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Now if you have a really stiff one, you can take your tire lever, get in there and work it up over, but you have to be very careful, because if you let the tip of this tire lever dig into the tube, you'll get a pinch flat from your tire lever. One trick I've done, and I admit that I definitely going to have strong hands, but I use this part of my hands right here. This part of your knuckles, if you grab it and just roll your wrists up forward, a lot of times you can get it to snap on. with
And when
your
the
bare
tire
hands.
warms, it becomes a little more supple too when you do that.
So if it's now.
So if you keep working it, it'll work with you sometimes.
You'll be there for a while.
Okay. So now this is installed. The last step you want to do before you inflate it, let me borrow this tube that's on the ground and show you why we're doing this. Right around where the valve is bonded to the tube's got a little circle, a little bit bigger than a patch. It's actually thicker rubber. And sometimes what will happen is this will get caught in between the tire and the wheel like that. Pinched like that. When you inflate it, it blows out right there. So the way to get rid of that problem is if you take your valve and just push it in there and then pull it back out, you're pushing that wide part up past the tire, and now it's inside the tire, not underneath of it. It's at this point you're ready to inflate it. Now, when you inflate a tire, you want to inflate it slowly initially to make sure that you don't blow it off of the wheel. I'm going to show you, we're going to blow one up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to show you what it looks like right before it blows up. I'll be right back. All right, so you have CO2 or pumps. CO2, the advantages are it's fast. It'll inflate a tire very quickly. I'm going to show you here in just a moment. Disadvantages are the cartridges are $4 a piece, so every time you inflate your tire, it just costs you $4. And they're one cartridge per inflation. So if you have 2 cartridges with you and you have 3 flats, you're out of luck. Now a pump is more reliable. A pump requires labor from you to put air in. There are different types of pumps out there. a skinny diameter like this is easier to hit higher pressures, and a larger diameter inflates faster. The bigger plunger, every time you move that thing, you're putting more air in. But when you get to the higher pressure, because of the larger diameter, it requires more strength to inflate it. So typically road bike pumps are going to be a smaller gauge, mountain bike pumps are going to be a wider gauge. The pump she's got is a little bit of a wide gauge, but that pump's also designed to be it gives you a lot of leverage. Can I borrow that real quick?
That's ginormous.
The way this type of a pump works is this is a folding floor pump. You put this on your tire, you put the peg out here,
Sweet.
and then...
Is that a foot peg?
Barbie pump. Is it a Barbie pump?
I'm not quite sure how this one comes apart.
You just have to rotate the pump. No,
It's also a silencer in case you want to assassinate.
it has, you just have to rotate it a little bit, like this.
Ah, there it is. Now it turns into a peg. So you can sit here and you'll have no problem hitting high pressures with this.
After tearing everything, I was like, wow.
The only downside to a pump like this is obviously its size and weight. You're carrying this with you everywhere you go. But in the event you have to use it, it's quite a bit more handy. So there's that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes?
Okay, is there any way that a hand pump is not, like, we can't inflate it enough? Because I carry CO2 cartridges because, like, maybe we're not strong enough.
Well, absolutely.
Time to
That's
hit
where
the weight
diameter of the
room.
pump. If you're having a hard time hitting high pressures, go with a smaller diameter pump, because then you can get more pressure in. But typically what it comes down to with a hand pump, it's really hard even for me to hit 100 PSI.
That's hard.
So usually you put it up as much as you can possibly get and nurse your bike home, which is another reason I like CO2.
So you do like CO2?
I do like CO2. When I ride, I carry CO2 cartridges. There's a couple things you should know about CO2. CO2 cartridges, I need to get those cartridges. I should have grabbed these earlier. There's a couple of different configurations.
All the cartridges were
First of all, there's multiple sizes. This is a 12 gram. This is where it all started. This is the size CO2 that they use in BB guns and paintball guns, things like that. Someone said, I bet we can inflate a tire with that, and they tried it. It brings your tire up about 3/4 of the way up, which is better than walking home, but it's not ideal. Next up is a 16 gram cartridge. Now 16s were designed for bikes. These will take your tire and fill it all the way up. So this is what you want to get. Now they also have threaded and non-threaded versions. The non-threaded version requires an inflator like this. The way it works is as you tighten the bottom of the inflator, it pushes this up into a hollow needle that will puncture the top. The way a threaded cartridge works, is this one here, the needle's inside of here, and this threads in. And the deal here is this is smaller. You don't have that bottom piece to put on there. Okay? Now if you look, there's a metal cap here that you can pierce, and there's a hollow needle in there.
Just like the glue.
Yeah, just like the glue. Exactly. Pretty much just empty it.
So it won't blow up your tire. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, 16 grams calibrated. When it stops, that's proper inflation. I'm going to pass it around. Everyone give that a
Wait, so I have
feel.
a question. It was
Code.
already, yeah, that one was already inflated.
No, I had just a little bit of air in it just to make sure it was seating.
Like burn your hands cold.
Can you start and stop it?
Yeah, with that one it's just got the little trigger.
When you're filling it? So you can-
Depending on your inflator, yes you can, if you have one with a trigger like that. And those things always get really cold when you use them because of the drop in pressure. That's normal. Now one note I have about CO2, if you're riding in temperatures like it is outside, sometimes it gets so cold it'll freeze up and air can't get through it. So on cold days I keep it in my jersey pocket next to my skin to hopefully keep it warm enough to work. Another thing about CO2 that most people don't know is the CO2 gas is smaller a molecule. Basically, if you're taking a pump, you're taking air from around us and forcing it in that tire. So there's, what, 70% nitrogen, 28% oxygen, and 2% trace elements. Those molecules are big. CO2 is pure CO2, and the molecules are much smaller. What that means is it leaks through the tube fast. So a lot of times people who buy a CO2 inflator come in and go, I've had the worst luck, I've had 3 flats this week. No, they've had 1 flat, and the CO2's been leaking out. This will last 1, maybe 2 days, and then your tire will be flat again. So this is great to get you home, but once I get home, I let the CO2 out of it, and then I take my floor pump and pump it back up.